The emergency room at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany buzzed with controlled chaos. Nurse Sarah Mitchell had seen countless wounded soldiers come through these doors, but something about the young Navy SEAL who arrived that October night in 2011 would change her life forever. Marcus Rodriguez was barely conscious when the helicopter landed. Shrapnel from an IED blast in Afghanistan had torn through his left leg and abdomen. His team had carried him for miles through enemy territory before reaching the extraction point. Blood loss was severe, and his vital signs were dropping fast. Sarah had been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight. The war was at its peak and wounded soldiers arrived daily. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes, but her hands remained steady as she prepared the trauma bay. She had learned to compartmentalize her emotions after 5 years of military nursing. When Marcus was wheeled in, Sarah immediately took charge of his care. His dark eyes flickered open briefly, meeting hers through his pain-induced haze. She saw something there, a determination to live that touched her deeply. Most soldiers came in either fighting or resigned to their fate. Marcus seemed to be making a promise to himself. The surgery lasted 8 hours. Sarah stayed by his side throughout the procedure, monitoring his vitals, adjusting medications, and whispering encouragement even when he couldn't hear her. Dr. Thompson, the lead surgeon, had seen many cases like this. The damage was extensive and survival was uncertain. During the first critical 48 hours, Sarah rarely left Marcus's bedside. She learned he was 26 years old from a small town in Texas and had been deployed for his 3rd tour. His medical record showed multiple commendations for bravery. His family lived thousands of miles away, and Sarah became his anchor in those first dark days. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, fighting infections and complications. Sarah talked to him constantly, telling him about her hometown in Ohio, her dreams of traveling after her military service ended, and silly stories from her nursing school days. She believed patients could hear everything, even when unconscious. On the 3rd night, Marcus's condition worsened. His fever spiked to dangerous levels and his heart rate became erratic. The doctors prepared Sarah for the worst. She held his hand and continued talking, sharing her favorite childhood memories and promising him that better days were ahead if he just held on. As dawn broke on the 4th day, Marcus's fever finally broke. His eyes opened clearly for the first time, and he squeezed Sarah's hand weakly. His voice was barely a whisper when he asked for water. Sarah felt tears of relief she hadn't allowed herself to shed for days. The recovery would be long and painful. Marcus faced multiple surgeries to repair the damage to his leg and abdomen. Sarah coordinated his care with unwavering dedication, learning his medication schedule by heart and advocating fiercely for his needs with the medical team. During quiet moments between treatments, they began to really talk. Marcus shared stories of his childhood, his decision to join the Navy, and his love for his team. Sarah told him about her nursing career, her volunteer work at animal shelters, and her plan to return to civilian life soon. They discovered a shared love of old movies and Mexican food. Sarah noticed how Marcus treated every staff member with respect, from the janitors to the senior doctors. Despite his pain, he thanked everyone who helped him and asked about their families. His character shone through even in his darkest moments. As weeks passed, Marcus's physical strength slowly returned, but Sarah could see the emotional toll the injury had taken. He worried about his team still deployed in Afghanistan and struggled with the possibility that his SEAL career might be over. Sarah listened without judgment and encouraged him to focus on healing one day at a time. Their connection deepened beyond the typical nurse-patient relationship. Sarah found herself looking forward to her shifts, knowing she would see Marcus's smile and hear his terrible jokes that somehow always made her laugh. He brought light to the difficult environment of the trauma ward. Other nurses noticed the special attention Sarah gave to Marcus, but no one questioned it. They had all seen how dedicated she was to every patient, but there was something different about the way she cared for the young SEAL. Her supervisor, Captain Williams, observed their interactions with knowing eyes but said nothing. The day finally came when Marcus was stable enough to be transferred to a rehabilitation facility in the United States. Sarah felt a profound sadness she hadn't expected. She had grown attached to many patients over the years, but losing Marcus felt different. He had become part of her daily routine, her reason for pushing through the exhaustion. On his last night in Germany, Marcus asked Sarah to sit with him. He told her that her care had saved not just his life but his will to live. He promised he would never forget her kindness and strength. Sarah gave him her address, though she wasn't sure why. Military friendships often faded when people returned to their separate lives. As Marcus was wheeled toward the transport plane, he turned back one last time. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching the man who had unknowingly captured her heart disappear into his uncertain future. She whispered a prayer for his continued healing and tried to convince herself that their paths crossing had been enough. Neither of them knew that this goodbye was not an ending, but the beginning of a love story that would span years, continents, and the challenges of two people trying to build a life after war had changed them both forever. 3 months after Marcus left Germany, Sarah received an unexpected letter at her base address. The handwriting was careful but shaky, and she recognized it immediately. Marcus had written to thank her again and update her on his recovery at the Naval Medical Center in San Diego. His letter painted a picture of grueling physical therapy sessions and the slow process of learning to walk normally again. The doctors were optimistic about his recovery, but his return to active SEAL duty remained uncertain. Marcus wrote about the other wounded warriors he met during rehabilitation, their shared struggles, and how Sarah's encouragement continued to motivate him during the hardest days. Sarah found herself reading the letter multiple times before finally writing back. She told him about the new patients filling the trauma ward, the changing seasons in Germany, and her upcoming deployment rotation back to the United States. She kept her tone friendly but professional, unsure how to navigate this new territory of staying connected with a former patient. Their correspondence became regular over the following months. Marcus's letters grew stronger and more optimistic as his physical condition improved. He described his family's relief at having him safely home, his sister's wedding where he proudly walked her down the aisle, and his determination to prove he could return to full military service. Sarah shared her own challenges of dealing with the constant stream of wounded soldiers, the emotional toll of losing patients despite her best efforts, and her growing certainty that she wanted to transition to civilian nursing when her military commitment ended. Marcus's letters became a bright spot in her increasingly difficult days. Through their written exchanges, they learned things about each other that hospital conversations had never revealed. Marcus wrote about his childhood dream of becoming a marine biologist before September 11th changed his life path. Sarah shared her love of photography and her secret ambition to document stories of military families for a book she hoped to write someday. The letters revealed their deeper thoughts and fears. Marcus admitted his struggle with survivor's guilt, knowing that other members of his unit had not been as fortunate as he was. Sarah confessed her growing battle with compassion, fatigue, and her fear that she was becoming too emotionally detached from her patients as a protective mechanism. Their friendship provided mutual support during a challenging time. Sarah's medical knowledge helped Marcus better understand his recovery process and advocate for himself during treatment. Marcus's resilience and humor reminded Sarah why she had chosen nursing in the first place, to make a real difference in people's lives during their most vulnerable moments. As Marcus's physical therapy progressed, he began including small photos with his letters, pictures of him walking on the beach near the medical center, spending time with his family in Texas, and eventually returning to limited training exercises. Sarah could see his strength returning not just physically, but emotionally as well. Sarah's letters included photos of her life in Germany, the small town near the base where she liked to walk, the local cafe where she had learned to speak basic German, and the rescue dog she had adopted named Buster, who waited for her after every long shift at the hospital. After a year of correspondence, Marcus received life-changing news. The Navy Medical Board had cleared him for return to active duty with his SEAL team. His letter to Sarah practically vibrated with excitement and gratitude. He credited her care during those critical first days with making his full recovery possible. Sarah felt genuine happiness reading about Marcus's success, but also an unexpected sadness. She realized that his return to active duty would likely mean deployment and an end to their regular communication. Military operations meant limited mail contact and the constant danger that had brought him to her hospital in the first place. Marcus's final letter before his redeployment was different from all the others. He wrote about how their friendship had sustained him through the darkest period of his life. He told Sarah that knowing someone like her existed in the world gave him hope for the future beyond military service. He promised to write when possible, but acknowledged the uncertainty ahead. Sarah's response took her days to write. She wanted to tell Marcus how much his letters had meant to her, how his courage had inspired her to push through her own difficult days, and how she would pray for his safety every night. Instead, she kept her words simple, wishing him success and safety and reminding him that he would always have a friend thinking of him. The letters stopped coming after Marcus redeployed. Sarah understood the realities of operational security and the demands of active missions, but she missed their connection more than she had expected. She found herself checking the mail hopefully for weeks before accepting that this chapter of their friendship had ended. Sarah threw herself into her work with renewed purpose. Inspired by Marcus's example of perseverance, she began documenting the stories of her patients, taking photographs when appropriate, and collecting oral histories of their experiences. The project gave her a sense of purpose beyond the daily medical routine. 6 months passed without any word from Marcus. Sarah had been transferred to a base in Italy for her final year of military service. She tried not to think about what the silence might mean, whether Marcus was simply too busy with missions to write, or if something more serious had happened. Then, on a rainy Tuesday in November, Sarah received a package with familiar handwriting. Inside was a book about marine biology, and a letter explaining that Marcus had carried it with him on his latest deployment. He had finally decided to pursue his original dream after his military service ended, and he wanted Sarah to be the first person to know. The letter revealed that Marcus had been promoted and was now leading training exercises for new SEAL candidates. His leg had healed completely, with only small scars remaining as evidence of that terrible night in Afghanistan. He wrote about visiting wounded warriors at military hospitals, trying to provide the same encouragement that Sarah had given him. Marcus also shared something he had never written before. He told Sarah that during his darkest moments in recovery, he had made a promise to himself that if he survived and healed completely, he would find a way to thank the nurse who had saved his life. He was planning to visit her when she returned to the United States. Sarah read the letter 3 times before it fully sank in. Marcus wanted to see her again. Their friendship had survived months of separation and the uncertainty of military life. She realized that somewhere during their correspondence, her feelings for the brave SEAL had grown into something deeper than friendship. As she sat in her small quarters that night, Sarah began composing a letter that would change both their lives. She was ready to tell Marcus that she looked forward to seeing him again, and that their connection had become one of the most important relationships in her life. Neither of them yet knew that destiny was preparing to bring them together in ways they had never imagined. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she applied lip gloss in the small mirror of her Cincinnati apartment. After 8 years of military service, she had finally returned to civilian life and was working at a veterans hospital in Ohio. Marcus had called 2 weeks earlier to arrange their meeting, and today was the day they would see each other for the first time since that emotional goodbye in Germany. 3 years had passed since their last face-to-face encounter. Their letter correspondence had continued sporadically, but both had been careful to maintain appropriate boundaries. Now, with Sarah out of the military and Marcus nearing the end of his SEAL career, those boundaries felt less important than the genuine friendship they had maintained. Marcus arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, his nervous energy making it impossible to sit still. He wore civilian clothes, dark jeans and a navy blue button-down shirt, but his military bearing was unmistakable. Other customers seemed to sense something special about him, though they couldn't quite identify what it was. When Sarah walked through the door, Marcus felt his breath catch. She looked different in civilian clothes, softer somehow, with her blonde hair falling loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in the practical military style he remembered. But her green eyes were exactly the same, warm and intelligent, scanning the room until they found his face. Their initial greeting was awkward, a hesitant hug between two people who had shared intimate conversations through letters but hadn't seen each other in years. Marcus noticed that Sarah seemed smaller than he remembered, though her presence still commanded attention. Sarah observed that Marcus looked completely healthy, with no visible signs of the injuries that had brought them together. They talked for 4 hours that first day, catching up on everything their letters had left unsaid. Marcus described his final missions, his decision to leave active duty, and his acceptance into a marine biology graduate program at UC San Diego. Sarah shared her adjustment to civilian nursing, her volunteer work with veteran support groups, and the photography project that had grown from documenting patient stories into a potential book. The conversation flowed easily, picking up where their letters had left off. They discovered new shared interests. Both had developed a love for hiking during their recovery periods. Both were learning to cook as a form of stress relief, and both felt somewhat displaced in civilian society after years of military structure. Marcus noticed how Sarah lit up when talking about her work with veteran families, photographing their reunions and documenting their stories of resilience. Her passion for helping others heal reminded him why he had been drawn to her strength during his own darkest hours. Sarah observed how Marcus's eyes sparkled when he discussed marine conservation, his plans for research and his dream of eventually teaching. As the afternoon wore on, they both realized this was more than just a friendly reunion. The connection they had felt through letters was even stronger in person. There was an undeniable chemistry that neither had fully acknowledged in their written correspondence, but which was impossible to ignore face-to-face. Marcus walked Sarah to her car as the sun began to set. Before she could open her door, he gently touched her arm and asked if he could see her again before returning to California. Sarah's smile was all the answer he needed. They made plans for dinner the following evening. Their second meeting confirmed what both had begun to suspect. Their feelings had evolved far beyond friendship. Over dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant, they talked about more personal topics. Marcus shared his struggles with transitioning from military to civilian life, his occasional nightmares about combat, and his uncertainty about pursuing relationships after years of putting his career first. Sarah opened up about her own challenges with post-military adjustment, her difficulty trusting people outside the military community, and her fear that civilian men wouldn't understand the intensity and dedication that military service had required from her. They both laughed when they realized they had similar concerns about dating people who hadn't shared their experiences. The evening ended with their first kiss in the parking lot outside Sarah's apartment building. It was gentle and tentative, both of them aware that this moment represented a significant shift in their relationship. Years of careful friendship were transforming into something neither had planned, but both desperately wanted. Marcus extended his visit by 3 days, spending every possible moment with Sarah. They visited the Veterans Hospital where she worked, and Marcus met some of her patients. Sarah was amazed to see how naturally he connected with wounded warriors, sharing his own story of recovery and offering hope through his example of complete healing. Sarah showed Marcus her photography portfolio, including images from her time in Germany and Italy. He was moved by her artistic eye and her ability to capture the humanity in her subjects. One photograph particularly struck him, a picture she had taken of him sleeping in his hospital bed, with dawn light streaming through the window. She had captured a moment of peace in the midst of his struggle. They spent hours walking through Cincinnati's parks, talking about their dreams for the future. Marcus described his research interests in marine ecosystem restoration. Sarah shared her vision of expanding her veteran family photography project into a national documentation effort. Both were surprised by how easily they could imagine supporting each other's ambitions. On Marcus's last night in Ohio, they had a serious conversation about the logistics of a long-distance relationship. He would be starting graduate school in San Diego, while Sarah was established in her job and volunteer work in Cincinnati. The distance was significant, but both felt their connection was worth the challenge. They decided to take things slowly and see where their relationship naturally led. Marcus would be busy with his studies, and Sarah had commitments to her photography project. They agreed to visit each other when possible and maintain their letter writing, now with the added element of romance. Marcus's departure was difficult but hopeful. Unlike their goodbye in Germany, this parting felt like a beginning rather than an ending. Sarah drove him to the airport, and their goodbye kiss lasted until the final boarding call. Both knew they were embarking on something special, even though the future remained uncertain. Over the following weeks, their letters took on a new intimacy. Marcus wrote about his excitement for his studies and his eagerness to see Sarah again. Sarah described how their reunion had given her new energy for her work and her art. Both admitted that they were falling in love, even though they were careful not to make demands or assumptions about the future. 3 months after Marcus's visit, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. Marcus had been selected for a prestigious research fellowship that would require him to spend 6 months in marine research stations around the world. It was an incredible opportunity for his career, but it would mean even more separation. Sarah encouraged him to accept the fellowship without hesitation. She understood the importance of following professional dreams, and she knew that their relationship needed to be strong enough to survive challenges. Her support meant everything to Marcus, confirming his growing certainty that Sarah was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. As Marcus prepared for his fellowship departure, both he and Sarah realized that their love story was just beginning. The foundation they had built through crisis, friendship, and correspondence was strong enough to support whatever challenges lay ahead. Neither suspected that Marcus's research travels would eventually lead to an opportunity that would bring them together permanently in the most unexpected way. Marcus stood on the deck of a research vessel in the Coral Triangle of Southeast Asia, watching the sunrise paint the ocean in brilliant oranges and pinks. It had been 4 months since he began his fellowship, and he was thousands of miles away from Sarah. The beauty of his surroundings couldn't diminish. The ache in his chest when he thought about how much he missed her. The fellowship had taken him to research stations in Australia, Fiji, and now Indonesia. His work studying coral reef restoration was groundbreaking and exactly what he had dreamed of doing. But every achievement felt incomplete without Sarah there to share it. He found himself taking photographs constantly, not for his research, but to send to the woman who had taught him to see the world through an artist's eyes. Sarah's photography project had evolved into something magnificent during Marcus's absence. She had received a grant to travel across the United States, documenting veteran families in all 50 states. Her work was gaining national attention, with exhibitions planned in major cities. The project was demanding and emotionally intense, but it kept her busy enough to manage the loneliness of missing Marcus. Their communication had adapted to the realities of Marcus's remote locations and Sarah's travel schedule. Sometimes weeks passed between phone calls due to poor satellite connections or conflicting time zones. Email became their lifeline, with both sending long, detailed messages about their daily experiences, their professional discoveries, and their growing certainty that they were meant to be together. Marcus's emails from the field were filled with wonder and scientific excitement. He described diving among pristine coral reefs, working with local conservation teams, and developing new techniques for coral transplantation. But every message also contained personal details. How he thought of Sarah when he saw a particularly beautiful sunset, how he wished she could photograph the incredible biodiversity he encountered daily, and how he counted the days until his fellowship would end. Sarah's emails chronicled her journey across America, meeting veteran families and capturing their stories through her lens. She wrote about the resilience she witnessed, the challenges these families faced, and the healing power of sharing their experiences. She also shared her loneliness, her growing success, and her increasing certainty that Marcus was the person she wanted to build a life with. The most challenging period came during Marcus's 5th month abroad, when Sarah's phone was stolen during a photography assignment in Chicago. For 2 weeks, they had no way to communicate except through email, but Marcus was stationed on a remote coral atoll with intermittent internet access. The silence between them felt ominous, and both began to worry that their relationship couldn't survive such extended separation. When communication was finally re-established, both were in tears during their first phone call. They had realized how much they depended on their connection, and how frightening it was to lose contact completely. The experience forced them to have honest conversations about their fears, their commitment to each other, and their plans for the future. Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He requested permission to cut his fellowship short by 2 weeks so he could attend Sarah's major exhibition opening in New York City. His research supervisor was initially resistant, but Marcus's dedication to his work over the previous months had earned him enough credibility to make the request successful. Sarah had no idea Marcus was planning to surprise her. She had thrown herself into preparing for the exhibition, which would showcase photographs from her veteran family project, alongside written stories she had collected. The show was titled After the Battle, Families Finding Home, and represented the culmination of 2 years of intensive work. The opening night was elegant and well-attended. Sarah wore a simple black dress and tried to hide her nervousness as reporters, art critics, and veteran advocacy groups mingled among her photographs. Her work was receiving praise beyond her expectations, with several pieces already marked as sold to private collectors and museums. Halfway through the evening, Sarah was speaking with a journalist about her inspiration for the project when she noticed a commotion near the entrance. People were turning and pointing, and Sarah heard someone mention something about a special guest. She looked toward the door and felt her heart stop. Marcus stood in the entrance wearing a dark suit and holding a bouquet of white roses. He looked travel-weary but incredibly handsome, scanning the crowd until his eyes found hers. Sarah's interview was forgotten as she moved through the crowd toward him, not caring that dozens of people were watching their reunion. Their embrace in the middle of the gallery was captured by several photographers, but neither Marcus nor Sarah noticed. 6 months of separation dissolved in that moment. Marcus whispered how proud he was of her achievement, how beautiful the exhibition was, and how much he had missed holding her in his arms. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions, congratulations, and stolen moments of conversation between Marcus and Sarah. Gallery visitors were fascinated by their story, the nurse who had saved the seal's life, their friendship through letters, and their long-distance romance. Several people mentioned that their love story would make a beautiful addition to Sarah's documentary work. After the gallery closed, Marcus and Sarah walked through Central Park in the early morning hours, catching up on everything that emails and phone calls had left unsaid. Marcus described the scientific breakthroughs he had achieved and his excitement about the research papers he would publish. Sarah shared her emotions about the exhibition's success and the overwhelming response to her work. More importantly, they talked about their future. Marcus had been offered a position with a marine conservation organization based in San Diego, but he was willing to relocate to be closer to Sarah. Sarah had received interest from publishers about turning her photography project into a book, which would require her to spend time in New York for meetings and promotion. They realized that their careers were both reaching critical moments that would determine their paths for years to come. The decisions they made in the coming months would affect not only their professional lives, but also their ability to build a life together. Marcus stayed in New York for a week, attending meetings with Sarah's publishers and gallery representatives. He was amazed by her professionalism and the respect she had earned in the art world. Sarah accompanied Marcus to his debriefing meetings with his fellowship sponsors, learning about the important conservation work he had accomplished. During quiet moments in Sarah's small New York sublet apartment, they made plans and compromises. Marcus would accept the San Diego position, but negotiate for flexibility to travel when Sarah's work required it. Sarah would pursue the book deal but structure her contract to allow time in California between promotional obligations. Their week together confirmed what both had known for months. They were ready to build a shared life, despite the logistical challenges their careers presented. Their love had survived military service, injury, recovery, separation, and professional demands. They were confident it could handle whatever came next. On Marcus's last night in New York, he gave Sarah a gift he had brought from his research travels, a piece of fossilized coral he had found while diving in Australia. He told her it represented the endurance of beautiful things, even when conditions changed dramatically around them. Sarah treasured the gift as a symbol of their relationship's strength. As Marcus boarded his flight back to California, both he and Sarah felt different than they had during previous separations. This goodbye felt temporary rather than indefinite. They had proven their love could survive distance and challenges. Now they were ready to discover what they could build together. When the testing was finally over, neither realized that Marcus's next research assignment would present them with an opportunity that would change their lives completely, bringing them together in a way that would honor both their professional dreams and their personal commitment to each other. Sarah was editing photographs in her Cincinnati studio when her phone rang with a California number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Elizabeth Chen, director of the Pacific Marine Conservation Institute in San Diego. Dr. Chen had seen Sarah's veteran family exhibition and had an unexpected proposition. The Institute was launching an ambitious new project documenting the intersection between military veterans and marine conservation efforts. Many former service members were finding healing and purpose through ocean-related careers and volunteer work. Dr. Chen wanted Sarah to lead the photography and storytelling component of this groundbreaking initiative. The position would be based in San Diego, working closely with marine researchers and veteran advocacy groups. The salary was competitive and the project had secured funding for 3 years. Most importantly for Sarah, the work would combine her passion for veteran stories with a new focus on environmental conservation. Sarah's heart raced as Dr. Chen described the opportunity. Not only was this the perfect evolution of her career, but San Diego was exactly where Marcus had accepted his marine conservation position. After 2 years of long-distance relationship challenges, the universe seemed to be aligning to bring them together. When Sarah called Marcus to share the news, his excitement was so loud that his research colleagues looked up from their work. Marcus had been at the Institute for several months and knew about the Veteran Conservation Project. He had actually suggested to Dr. Chen that they needed a photographer who understood military culture, though he had never imagined Sarah might be the perfect candidate. The coincidence felt like destiny to both of them. Marcus had been hesitant to pressure Sarah about relocating, knowing how important her independence and career were to her. Sarah had been equally careful not to suggest that Marcus should change his plans to accommodate her geographic preferences. Now they were being offered the chance to pursue their professional dreams in the same city. Sarah accepted the position after a week of careful consideration and contract negotiations. Her New York publisher was initially disappointed to lose her East Coast presence, but they agreed to work around her new location for book promotions and future projects. Her veteran advocacy work in Ohio could continue through remote coordination and periodic travel. Moving to San Diego required Sarah to uproot her life once again, but this time the change felt like coming home rather than starting over. Marcus helped her find a small apartment near the coast, close enough to his own place that they could spend time together without the pressure of immediately moving in together. Sarah's first month at the Institute exceeded all her expectations. The Veteran Conservation Project introduced her to former military personnel who had found new purpose in ocean research, marine animal rescue, underwater archaeology, and coastal restoration efforts. Their stories were compelling and visually stunning, perfect for her documentary photography style. Marcus proved to be an invaluable resource for Sarah's work, introducing her to veteran colleagues and helping her understand the scientific aspects of the conservation projects she was documenting. His reputation at the Institute opened doors and created trust with research subjects who might have been hesitant to work with an outsider. Working in the same field created a new dimension to their relationship. Sarah attended scientific conferences where Marcus presented his coral restoration research. Marcus joined Sarah at veteran advocacy events where she displayed her photography. They could finally share their professional lives completely, understanding each other's work in ways that long-distance communication had never allowed. Their personal relationship deepened as well. Living in the same city allowed them to experience normal couple activities for the first time. Grocery shopping together, attending movies, hosting dinner parties for friends, and taking weekend trips along the California coast. Simple domestic routines felt miraculous after years of separation. 6 months into Sarah's time in San Diego, their work began to intersect in unexpected ways. Sarah was documenting a coral restoration project involving veteran divers when she realized that Marcus's research was providing the scientific foundation for the conservation efforts she was photographing. They were literally working on different aspects of the same environmental healing mission. The revelation led to a breakthrough idea. Sarah proposed creating a comprehensive multimedia documentary that would showcase both the scientific importance of marine conservation and the personal transformation experienced by veterans working in the field. The project would combine Marcus's research data with Sarah's storytelling abilities to create something unprecedented. Dr. Chen was immediately excited about the concept. The Institute had been looking for ways to increase public engagement with their conservation work, and Sarah's proven ability to connect with audiences made her the perfect person to lead such an initiative. Marcus's scientific credibility would ensure the project's educational value. Securing funding for the expanded documentary project required months of grant applications and presentations to environmental foundations and veteran support organizations. Sarah and Marcus worked together on proposals, combining their expertise to create compelling arguments for the project's importance and potential impact. During this collaborative period, their professional partnership strengthened their personal bond. They discovered they worked well together, balancing each other's strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. Marcus's methodical scientific approach complemented Sarah's intuitive artistic vision. Sarah's communication skills enhanced Marcus's technical expertise. The breakthrough came when the Department of Veterans Affairs expressed interest in funding the project as part of their veteran rehabilitation and career transition programs. The documentary would showcase alternative career paths for former military personnel while advancing important environmental conservation goals. With funding secured, Sarah and Marcus began planning an ambitious documentary that would take them to marine conservation sites across the Pacific coast. They would document veteran-led restoration projects, interview former service members who had found healing through ocean work, and create a compelling narrative about the connection between military service and environmental stewardship. The project launch coincided with Sarah's book publication. Her veteran family photography collection had become a critical and commercial success, with reviews praising her ability to capture both strength and vulnerability in her subjects. Book tours and media interviews raised her national profile and brought additional attention to her marine conservation work. Marcus's coral restoration research was also gaining recognition in scientific journals and environmental policy circles. His work was being cited in international climate change discussions, and he had been invited to present at major conferences around the world. His career was reaching new heights just as his personal life was finally stabilizing. As they prepared for their first joint research expedition to document veteran conservation efforts in Hawaii, both Sarah and Marcus felt that all the pieces of their lives were finally falling into place. Their individual careers were thriving, their collaborative work was groundbreaking, and their relationship had survived every test that distance and circumstance had presented. The evening before their departure, Marcus took Sarah to dinner at the restaurant where they had shared their first meal after her move to San Diego. As they watched the sunset over the Pacific Ocean, both reflected on the long journey that had brought them to this moment of perfect alignment between their personal and professional dreams. Neither suspected that their Hawaiian expedition would present Marcus with an opportunity to make the most important proposal of his life, or that Sarah's answer would set the stage for a future that would exceed even their most optimistic dreams about love, partnership, and shared purpose. The adventure that had begun in a German trauma ward was about to culminate in a moment that would define the rest of their lives together. The early morning light filtering through the water above the coral reef in Maui created an ethereal underwater cathedral. Sarah adjusted her waterproof camera housing as she descended alongside Marcus and the team of veteran divers they were documenting. This was their final day of filming for the marine conservation documentary, and the footage they had captured over the past 2 weeks exceeded all their expectations. Marcus moved through the water with the grace of someone completely at home in the ocean environment. Sarah watched him work with the coral restoration team, carefully transplanting healthy coral fragments to damaged reef sections. The veterans they were documenting had found profound healing in this underwater work, contributing to environmental recovery while recovering from their own invisible wounds. Through her camera lens, Sarah captured the concentration on Marcus's face as he worked, the careful teamwork between the veteran divers, and the vibrant marine life that thrived around the restored coral sections. The visual story was powerful. Warriors who had seen destruction now dedicating themselves to rebuilding and protecting life. After the dive, the team gathered on the boat to review the day's work and celebrate the completion of their Hawaiian documentation phase. Sarah was downloading images from her camera when she noticed Marcus seemed unusually quiet. He kept checking his watch and scanning the horizon as if waiting for something. Captain Rodriguez, the veteran boat operator who had been helping with their project, announced that he wanted to take them to one final location before heading back to shore. He steered the boat toward a secluded coral formation that locals called Cathedral Reef because of its dramatic underwater archways and pristine condition. As they anchored at the site, Marcus suggested that he and Sarah take one last dive together, just the two of them, to capture some final images of the pristine reef. Sarah agreed, thinking it would be a perfect way to conclude their Hawaiian work. She grabbed her camera gear, never suspecting that Marcus had been planning this moment for months. The cathedral reef was breathtaking, with towering coral formations creating natural archways and chambers filled with tropical fish. Sunlight, streaming through the water, created dramatic beams of light that seemed almost supernatural. Sarah was immediately absorbed in photographing the incredible scenery, moving from one stunning composition to another. Marcus swam beside her, pointing out interesting formations and marine life, but Sarah noticed he seemed more nervous than usual. His breathing was slightly irregular, and he kept checking his dive computer more frequently than necessary. She assumed he was simply being extra cautious on their final dive of the expedition. After 20 minutes of exploring the reef, Marcus guided Sarah to a particularly spectacular coral garden where the water was crystal clear, and schools of colorful fish created a living rainbow around them. He tapped his tank with his dive knife to get her attention, the metallic sound echoing through the water. When Sarah looked up from her camera, Marcus was floating in front of her, holding something in his hands. Her heart stopped as she realized what she was seeing through her dive mask. Marcus had somehow managed to bring a waterproof container underwater, and inside was an engagement ring that sparkled even in the filtered sunlight of the ocean depths. Marcus had practiced this moment countless times, but actually being 40 feet underwater with the woman he loved, trying to propose marriage while wearing scuba gear, was more emotional than he had anticipated. He pointed to himself, then to Sarah, then made the hand signal for together forever that they had learned during their dive training. Sarah's eyes filled with tears behind her mask as Marcus opened the waterproof container and carefully removed the ring. He had chosen a simple but elegant design, a platinum band with a single diamond that reminded him of the way sunlight sparkled on ocean water. The setting was designed to be practical enough for someone whose hands were constantly working, whether with patients, cameras, or marine research equipment. Unable to speak underwater, Marcus communicated his proposal through hand signals and gestures that were more eloquent than words could have been. He pointed to his heart, then to Sarah, then gestured to the beautiful reef around them. His message was clear. He loved her. He wanted to spend his life with her, and he couldn't imagine a more perfect place to ask than surrounded by the marine environment they both worked to protect. Sarah's response was immediate and enthusiastic. She nodded vigorously, causing her regulator to bubble frantically, and extended her left hand toward Marcus. The underwater proposal was captured by the reef's natural audience, curious fish, that swam around them as Marcus carefully slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger. They embraced underwater, their scuba equipment making the moment awkward but incredibly romantic. Both were crying behind their masks, and their breathing was so excited that they had to focus on calming down to avoid using too much air from their tanks. The engagement was the most unique and memorable either could have imagined. When they surfaced and climbed back onto the boat, Captain Rodriguez and the crew were waiting with champagne and congratulations. Marcus had coordinated with everyone involved in their project to make the proposal special. Sarah realized that the entire final day had been planned around this moment, with everyone except her knowing what Marcus intended. The celebration continued back at their hotel that evening, with phone calls to family and friends across the mainland. Sarah's parents were overjoyed but not surprised. They had been hoping Marcus would propose ever since meeting him during Sarah's book tour. Marcus's family welcomed Sarah warmly, having heard about her for years through Marcus's letters and phone calls. As they planned their wedding over the following months, Sarah and Marcus decided to incorporate elements that honored their unique love story. They would marry at the Marine Conservation Institute where they worked, surrounded by colleagues who had become family. The ceremony would take place during sunset, overlooking the Pacific Ocean that had brought them together professionally and personally. Sarah's wedding dress was elegant but practical, allowing her to move freely for the outdoor ceremony. She carried a bouquet that included coral-colored flowers as a tribute to Marcus's research work. Marcus wore his dress blues, honoring the military service that had first brought them together, with small coral cufflinks that Sarah had given him as an engagement gift. The wedding ceremony was attended by colleagues from the Marine Institute, veterans from Sarah's photography projects, and family members who had traveled from across the country. Dr. Chen officiated the ceremony, having become ordained specifically to marry the couple whose work had brought such recognition to the Institute. Their vows were personal and emotional, referencing their journey from nurse and patient to research partners to life partners. Marcus spoke about how Sarah had saved his life twice, once in the German hospital, and again by showing him what love and partnership could look like. Sarah promised to support Marcus's scientific dreams while pursuing her own artistic vision, and to face whatever challenges life might bring with the same courage they had both shown in their military service. The reception featured photographs from Sarah's work displayed around the venue, creating a visual story of their shared commitment to veteran advocacy and marine conservation. Marcus's research colleagues presented them with a specially created coral garden that would be planted in their honor at a restoration site they had worked on together. As their first dance began, playing to a song they had chosen during one of their long separation periods, Sarah and Marcus reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment. From a trauma ward in Germany to underwater engagement. In Hawaii, their love story had unfolded across continents and years of challenges. Their wedding night was spent in the same hotel where they had celebrated their engagement, overlooking the ocean that represented both Marcus's professional passion and the setting for their most romantic moment. They talked late into the night about their plans for the future, the documentary projects they would complete together, the research expeditions they would share, and the family they hoped to build. Years later, when Sarah and Marcus told their story to their children, they would emphasize how love had grown from crisis, friendship, and shared purpose. Their marriage became a partnership that strengthened both their individual careers and their collaborative work, proving that the best relationships enhance rather than limit personal dreams. The trauma ward where they first met had been a place of healing for Marcus's physical wounds. Their marriage became a place of healing for the emotional scars that military service had left on both of them. Together, they had created something beautiful from circumstances that had initially seemed tragic. Their love story became legendary among their colleagues and the veteran community they served through their work. It proved that sometimes the most profound connections are forged in the most unexpected circumstances, and that true love can survive any test when both people are committed to growing together rather than apart.